Hey, everybody. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, we started doing these Star Wars podcasts, and we're here to finish what we started, just like Kylo Ren is going to finish what his great-grandpappy started. We're going to talk about Star Wars The Force Awakens, and we're joined, as always, by Clay and Dave. Guys, how are you?
Good.
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely.
I'm
Yeah, The Force
glad we finally got back to this now that you've sold the podcast to Disney.
That's. I was watching a lot of those interview clips of Lucas when he still seemed a little bit bitter about selling to Disney at some point, but
They're great. They're actually really great to watch at this point.
yeah, he's an odd little fellow, but we might not get too much into him because he's now sort of out of this. He sells his idea and his franchise's baby to Disney, the big conglomerate, and they hired JJ Abrams to sort of helm this new thing. And a whole new cast takes place 30 years after Return of the Jedi. It follows the adventures of Rey, Finn, and Poe Dameron as they search for Luke Skywalker and fight alongside the Resistance. Yes, The Force Awakens came out in 2015. Has your opinion of the movie changed at all? And I guess we'll open it up with Dave. I think your opinion had changed. Like, how did you like this movie when it came out, right? And you're sort of a little bit off on it now?
Yep. The first time I saw it was I saw it in the theater. I actually waited a while. It was probably 6 or 8 weeks after the release. And I watched it with my kid, and I walked out and I said, yeah, that was really good. And then I saw it again on a plane, and kind of didn't like it after that. It bored me. Like, I couldn't even really stay into it. It was on a plane, I understand, but I've since watched it another time by myself at home, and it's just, I don't think it's great.
Sure. Clay?
I'm more or less the same. I know opinion on this movie has kind of shifted since Rogue One came out. It's kind of shifted in the couple years since it came out, but after Rogue One came out, it seemed to shift very heavily for a lot of people. But I still think I think they did a really good job with this movie. I think they had to a very small opening they needed to thread on their needle, and I think they did a really good job with it.
You said thread the needle. You didn't say fire a torpedo or whatever into the small opening.
I'm not a fucking nerd, Wes.
But let's see. I don't think my opinion has changed too much of it either. And it's funny coming off the this recent time that I watched this, coming off the Star Trek Generations movie. It struck me how similar it kind of is in a lot of ways to Star Trek Generations, except it's better than Star Trek Generations.
I hope it's considerably better than that.
Yeah, it's considerably better, but it's another passing the torch film where I feel like they're a little bit hamstrung in what they can do in this movie. And I guess my first sort of takeaway of the movie is basically that Disney bought this and they turned to JJ Abrams. They said, for a baseball analogy, like, we just need a single. Like, if you give us a double, that's fantastic, but just get us on base, and please, like, we have all these other things lined up. The prequels were basically, you were trying to be intentionally walked and you still struck out somehow. But
yeah,
this one is, they just need a single. I think they got the single out of it, and they kind of, they can move on. They got runners in scoring position. They're ready to go going into the future. And I feel that's been my general opinion of the movie and hasn't really changed all that much. It doesn't blow me away. I don't think it's very rewatchable in a lot of ways. Like, it has moments in the middle that really drag a lot for some reason. And
yeah,
go ahead. You can base off that, but I find that it just, the pacing, and it doesn't hold my attention the entire way through.
I think the character stuff in this movie is great. I think one of the things that they had to do to be successful here was they needed to, to look at what they had to do overall. They basically had to regain the goodwill for Star Wars that was wasted by the prequels, having long enough time to gestate that they're universally reviled, except for like those 4 guys on Twitter that made that documentary.
Yep.
They had to move the story forward. They had to work in the previous casts to get everybody, get all of the older fans kind of back into it. And then they also had to create new characters that were good enough on their own that they could move forward with. And they managed to do all of those things pretty successfully. I think I did notice this. I will say that, like, the not to get super specific right off the bat, but the scene from when they get to the rebellion base through when they get to Starkiller base is pretty bad. Like they just, it's just like, we need some reason to do whatever we're doing. Let's just talk for a couple minutes and hope nobody really thinks about what's going on.
Does that include the Han Solo rolling monster scene? Is that a part of that?
No, that's way before. That's
Okay.
that scene's not great either. But like that, there's a certain point I think they do pretty well overall. Getting you into the new stuff that they're doing. But then right before they attack Starkiller base, it's like when they start talking about shield oscillators and all this other kind of garbage, and it's just like, you okay. I'm just gonna say whatever, and then hope that once you get there, it all plays out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say it does. It probably does drag a little bit in some spots. Yeah.
Do you? Yeah, having watched it and to sort of tie into the generations thing, it feels like it feels a little obvious to me of them trying to bring back, the Solo thing is a big part of it and all that stuff, and Princess Leia and everything, but I feel like modernizing it is kind of problematic to me. And like, I'm going to get into this more in my inevitable Star Wars versus Star Trek podcast, but the problem I have with, or Star Wars and Star Trek are like opposites in this way, where Star Wars, the longer it goes, or Star Trek, the longer it goes, the more impressed I can get by it. The longer Star Wars goes on, the less impressed I am by anything that's happening in it. Because
you mean like inside a movie, like
in terms
or are you
of
talking just like in the whole franchise?
in terms of like expanding the universe of Star Wars, because when the originals came out, right, the movies were this fantasy adventure thing where they were saying that this is the Anakin Skywalker, Luke Skywalker thing is the most important thing that has ever happened in the universe, right? And the prequels are okay in that because they kind of explain the backstory of how that came around. The further expansion you get, I still look at every movie and go, well, this can't possibly be as important as the Skywalker stuff. So why do I feel it's important? And Star Trek it doesn't have that grand aspiration. So I feel like you can expand the Star Trek universe in a lot easier way just by focusing on different people. If you focus on unimportant people in the Star Wars universe, I don't care about them.
Well, I think that's one of the things I've heard people complain about this movie is that they were kind of annoyed that it was another Skywalker family centric Star Wars movie, and that never really computed with me because I guess for better or worse, kind of going on what you're saying, Wes, the Skywalker family is the story of Star Wars. Like you can do the other stuff like the Rogue Ones and the offshoots and all that kind of stuff, but like the main body story of Star Wars has always been the story of the Skywalker family. So to do something different would feel I don't think it would really feel right. Like, because the entire story of Star Wars is a story about legacy and a story about destiny and stuff being passed down. So to not have the Skywalkers involved feels like, it's like, maybe this isn't the best analogy to use, but it's like getting pissed off because Godfather 3 was about the Corleone family, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's just what it's about. And I think the way that they're moving it forward here is actually pretty good by not involving Luke at all till the end, but you still got Kylo Ren, who's still part of the family, who is kind of on an inverse journey to what Luke was gone. And I don't know. I think they do a good job with that stuff. And I like that stuff. I think the weight that they give everything by the end of the movie, by the time you get to the Kylo Ren Rey lightsaber fight, I feel like they earn it pretty well by establishing those characters and establishing the legacy that's at stake, at least on the surface with Kylo Ren and somewhere yet to be revealed with Rey.
Yeah. What would you think, Dave? Would you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that you can't really do a Star Wars movie within, you can't do 7, 8, and 9 and not make it about the Skywalker family. If 1 through 6 are about the Skywalker family, so 7, 8, and 9 have to include that too. And it actually bugged me that there wasn't enough of that stuff in there. I guess you're right, Clay, that Kylo Ren's part of the family, so the story's moving through him, but like Luke isn't in it until the very end. There's very minimal Leia in it. Han Solo's in it and he's good, but I wanted more Luke, and I really just didn't care for what they did at all with Princess Leia.
Yeah, I guess that the Luke thing at the end kind of ties into what I see as a problem with the pacing, and I don't know if this was like intentionally designed this way, but my note here, I don't know if it'll make full sense, but the movie has no time to explain. It needs to get action, and it needs to hit all the points that the audience wants to see. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's intentional or if they think that this is a good way to, but the movie to me has a lot of unanswered questions that it doesn't really go into at any sense, because it doesn't want to waste the time of explaining the backstory of what's going on. It wants to do that in future movies, and it wants to sort of push it out, but it feels a little bit odd to me. Like one of the things would be like Finn's turn at the very start feels very abrupt to me. It doesn't make a lot of, like, I know that they have to just kind of get him into the movie and do things, but coming off of what I've seen of the Empire and everything, and these guys dress exactly like the Empire, so I figure they are basically the Empire. It's difficult to fit in how Finn has changed, how things have changed in these 30 years, I guess would be my problem. And the movie doesn't really want to explain that, just like it doesn't want to explain Rey at this point. It doesn't want to explain a lot about what happened with Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker and everything like that, which is fine as a mystery, but it feels like there's a lot of the story here that I find unsatisfying because they're just leaving it for a future movie.
Sure, definitely. And that's why, like, it feels more like a JJ Abrams movie to me than it did a Star Wars movie, because it doesn't develop as much as it hints towards things and just gives little, Easter eggs here and there. Like that's what bugged me about it too. Like Rey's character. A lot of like the character development they do in there is mysterious, and it never explains why. And you got to wait for the next movie to find it, and it just bugs me. Just tell a story, man.
Right. That's how it's like that's how I compare it to Generations. It's that connection that isn't. It's not about sort of setting up the story at this point as much as making the link shown between the old original series and this new series. What were you going to say, Clay?
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I wish they had sacrificed like the Rathtar sequence for just like a quiet scene where they just sort of talked about what had been going on for a while, or like what exactly like the politics are. That I know this is ironic to say coming off of the prequels, but I kind of wish someone had established like what the politics were.
Like, what are the trade agreements between these planets at this point?
Well, that's another thing that really takes it away from Star Wars, is like there's no galactic context to the movie at all. Unlike any of the other ones, like even the first one, they've got some galactic stuff going on. They talk about like the Senate, and they kind of establish a political background, so it feels like the whole galaxy's at stake. This one doesn't. It doesn't even care. It's just like, oh yeah, well, they're fighting Nazis now, or ISIS, or some combination between the two. Don't worry about it. Just watch.
Well, I want to talk about the actual political setup, because why is the army of what is essentially the government called the Rebellion? Right? Yeah. Or the Resistance, right? They're called the Resistance or something. It doesn't
I guess they never really established that the rebels won, but I don't know. It's not clear. They don't talk about it.
The line that they use in the opening crawl that I always found kind of vague, unnecessarily vague, is they refer to the First Order as rising from the ashes of the Empire. Yeah. And that implies that the Empire was completely defeated. But I mean, for the amount of power that they seem to have, are they the minority group here, or is it that like the Empire, like there was a power vacuum and then this is what ended up filling it? They're still fairly, like, I guess what's missing is, in the original ones, the Empire was always like, you could always feel the pressure from the Empire, even if it was just like a kind of an ethereal concept. The power of and control of the Empire was always felt. Yeah. Whereas here, the First Order you don't know what they do, or like what power they actually have, other than the fact that they have this giant planet-killing weapon. There's no like, I don't know how the First Order even relates to the Rebellion, really, or the Resistance, because there's also the Republic. So I guess they're fine, I guess, for at least until the planet gets blown up.
Yep.
But like, I'm not sure what the scope of the First Order's power actually is, and generally, I would say it doesn't really matter that much. But when you have the history of Star Wars, and because like if you look at the first movie, you could very easily say, well, it doesn't matter. It's World War II in space, and the Nazis are the Empire, et cetera, et cetera. You know who the good guys are, you know who the bad guys are. But when you're continuing the story, it's like now we're into Cold War East Germany,
right?
And we don't know who's controlling what, or so there needs to be some sort of context as to what's going on with these guys.
Right. We already have the backstory from the original 6 movies, so now you can kind of fill in the details. You don't need to sort of wipe the whole slate clean and start over because they already understand everything.
And honestly, I would not be surprised whatsoever if the conversation, if like there's a script out there somewhere where that stuff is in there, and then the people behind the camera, I don't know if it was the director or Disney or whatever, was just like, okay, that's great. We're happy. That's so cool that you put all that thought into this. But we just need to keep everybody engaged. We need to keep the action moving in this movie. And I think, when people first came out of it, the people I knew, a lot of them reacted to it as like, oh man, it's a roller coaster ride. It's just action, front to back. And it's the polar opposite of what the prequels were, which was just kind of a lot of talking and trade agreement stuff, or at least, traditionally, that's the belief anyway.
Yeah.
So I could see why they would kind of shy away from more complex politics stuff. But even complexity aside, I wish that there was some sort of stronger reinforcing of the relationship between the two fighting sides.
Yeah. I get from the movie, I get the opinion that the First Order was outside of the Empire somehow, but I don't really understand how they got all their stuff. But looking at the Wikipedia, it says that the First Order is a rump state, which is basically like a part of a state that falls apart. It goes off on its own. And it has been amassing its power in secret for 3 decades since the Return of the Jedi.
So it's like Hydra, basically.
Yeah, I don't really get that from this movie at all.
No.
And they feel like they're a totally new organization that we have to deal with, even though they're using all the Empire's ships and stuff. They somehow got all that stuff from them, which I don't know. I'm not going to go into how much of all that makes sense, but it's easily a shorthand for these are the bad guys because they fly the bad guy ships and stuff.
Yeah.
And then Kylo Ren, obviously, because I guess we can talk about the villains and everything. Who is why can I always it's Kylo Ren, and who's the Dark Lord at this point? Snoke.
Snopes.com.
Yeah.
He fact checks all the Jedi.
He does.
I mean, he does tell you that Han Solo is his father. That's a fact that he drops on you.
Veracity, pants on fire. So, yeah, I mean, we can talk about the new villains, and I think my criticism of the villains in this, it ties into my whole sort of I don't really like the cyclicalness that they're trying to go here, which is kind of like a David Simon Wire version in fantasy Star Wars stuff where, this is never going to end. This conflict is going on forever. It's good versus evil. Here's a whole bunch of new characters who are related to the old characters, and they're going to fight their own version of evil because this is just a cycle. It'll always keep going and going. What's frustrating about it to me is when I first saw the movie, I thought it was cool that no one is particularly good at being a Jedi or a Sith in this movie. Mm-hmm. And when I watch it again, I find it kind of irritating. And I don't know, I don't know why. And I think it's better for the story if they're not particularly good. But it's sad that you kind of see them bumbling their way through everything, like Kylo Ren and Rey.
It's too bad they weren't.
Can I stick up for Kylo Ren? Because, I've got a lot of criticisms with the movie. I mostly don't like it, but I still do like Kylo Ren. I mean, the Snoke he looks like a cheap Voldemort. I didn't like it at all. But Kylo Ren, I think the meta aspect around him is really cool. It's almost like they wanted to get a Darth Vader, but they knew that they could never do that again, and they'd never get it if they even tried. Yep. They'd just fail. So they got Kylo Ren, who is that in a character. He's a guy who wants to be Darth Vader, but just fails. He's not as good at it.
Yes.
And I like it. I think it's cool.
I think Kylo Ren is a great character. I think they nailed it with him, especially because if you look at, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he's the most accurate dark side character they've ever had, because the entire description of the dark side is that, you know, you are giving into your anger and your hate. So of course he's going to be like kind of, and he's not fully trained at this. You know, he's kind of a dark side hipster to an extent, which makes perfect sense why he would be prone to tantrums and outbursts, and because that feels more where the Jedi is all about more focus and everything. It makes perfect sense to me that Kylo Ren would be fly off the handle so easily and be so overly emotional. Yeah, I think he's great. I mean, and I kind of consider, I was thinking about this when I was watching it this time. I kind of consider the story to be more about him, about his journey, than about anybody else's, because he's the only one that really kind of goes on an arc. Rey kind of is just sort of getting started. Finn is sort of just, you know, he's a fun character, but he doesn't really do much. He's just sort of there. Same with Poe Dameron. But if you're looking for someone who is going through an actual change in the movie, Kylo Ren is number one at the top of that list, because it's clearly established that he is, he's Han and Leia's kid who was force sensitive or whatever, went to train with Luke, got seduced to the dark side, but he is, excuse me, he is constantly fighting this urge to. He's fighting the pull from both sides, just the way like Luke was in you know, or at least they implied Luke was, but he never really was.
Right. Yeah.
Here, the fight feels real for him, and I think, and at the end, he takes the steps necessary to further his descent into the dark side by killing his father. And I mean, as far as a single character arc, I think it's really good. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I think that he's I think he's fleshed out the most just because he gets the most information about his story, right? Like Rey doesn't, you don't really learn anything about her. You don't learn a lot about Finn except for the fact that he wants to be a good guy. Ren gets the most development out of all it. And I like the development that they have with him. I feel it's just sort of the cyclical nature of, for some reason, the training of the Jedi to me feels like a tedious aspect to repeat over and over again. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, they're not. So, in what sense here do you mean?
Well, like, because the movie is this movie, like for better or for worse, is a lot of retreads of what worked for A New Hope in a lot of ways. Like the story is very similar and things like that. But the fact that you have to retrain a new Jedi feels very tedious to me, because the training of the Jedi in this universe isn't particularly interesting to me. Like there's nothing.
That's why they skip over it mostly. Yeah.
Right. Like they'll do a little training, like Rocky training montage or something. But I'm also of the opinion I don't really want to see like a whole bunch of Jedi running around fighting each other. That doesn't feel very interesting to me.
Yeah, so, I don't think we have to worry about that.
So it's I don't know. I find that to be the most tedious aspect of the repetition that this movie represents. That this is all sort of starting over again, and they're going to train. Although I do think that Abrams seems to have a better understanding of what the light side and dark side would be, sort of like on the psychology of the characters, because we can go into, but this lightsaber fight at the very end of this movie is my favorite out of all the movies.
It's unbelievable. It's so good.
And I think a big reason why is because I remember ranting and raving in the other movies about the fights never represented what these characters actually claim to believe in a lot of ways. Like in the last prequel, Obi-Wan draws his lightsaber first on Anakin and attacks him. It's like, what the hell is going on? Like, this guy should be purely defense or whatever. But just the shot of Rey getting pinned down, and she basically just meditates. Like, we're going to take meditation as shorthand for, like, calming your emotions and stuff like that. And that's what allows her to beat Ren, which is totally makes sense. And it's the way that a lot of the Jedi should fight in this universe, in my opinion. But if you guys just want to talk about the fight scene and what you enjoyed or disliked about it.
Do you want to go, Dave?
I thought it looked really good. It was in the snow. There was the red and the blue. They did it in like a dark light, kind of akin to the Luke and Darth Vader fight in Empire Strikes Back, where it's all dark light and the lightsabers are lighting everything up.
And Tyrannus and Anakin.
Yeah.
I deleted that from my memory. But I don't know. One of the problems the second time around when I watched it, and again, granted, it was on a flight, but what bored me the most with the movie was every single action scene. And it starts with the stupid monsters in Han Solo's freighter, which was the worst scene in the whole movie. And it moves on and on. The battle on Orange Yoda's planet was awful as well, and I'll get into that later. That was just butt. But the lightsaber fight in the end, by the time you get there, I don't know, the action just, I mean, it looks really good. I guess that's the best action scene in the movie, I can say.
Yeah.
But there's no meaningful dialogue in it. Like, there's nothing that I take away from it, unlike the other lightsaber fights that happen in the original three.
Yeah, sorry. I just have one question, and I don't want to go on it too long. But watching it this time, I got the opinion. I think they're dropping hints that I never realized before, that these two recognize each other on some subconscious level. Does that make sense?
I think
do you get that opinion?
I don't know if I would say they recognize each other, but I think there's some sort of, for lack of a better term, like force sensitive. I think they notice there's something about. So like one of the reasons that I love the fight is because I actually think that it's, by the time you get to this point, so. For me, the thing that has always interested me more than anything else in Star Wars has been, the characters. And I think in all of movies, basically, a strong character-motivated lightsaber fight is pretty much the best thing you'll ever see.
Yeah.
Like, the lightsaber is probably one of the best, if not the best, weapon ever put on film. Just it's made for movies. It's got drama built into it, unless you spend.
It's made
30
for
minutes.
movies because it otherwise doesn't make sense as a
That's
weapon.
true, but you know what I mean. What I mean.
It can go down to like the color can represent things.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a weapon, but it's also a light source, so you can use it in really cool, creative ways, and it has a lot of drama built into it. Unless you're doing it for 30 minutes in a volcano planet, and then you're just kind of bored by it. And like it's a sword, and swords are always more interesting. Clearly I'm a Highlander fan. And so this movie, by the time you get to the point where they have their lightsaber fight, I feel like they've done a good enough job building up these characters. Like the Rey's kind of thing through the movie is that, based on the title, it's the awakening of her force powers, right?
Yeah.
And she comes in contact with the lightsaber earlier, and she gets some sort of like flashback to, so she's connected. She's connected to the Skywalker family somehow. Clearly, they haven't said how yet, but she clearly is. And so the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my God, these two are related, and they don't even know it. And it's like it just goes back into the family struggle that is central to Star Wars, except in this case they don't realize that that's what's happening.
Yeah, right.
When Rey's final thing where she force pulls the lightsaber into her hands is just like it's an emotionally charged lightsaber fight that I haven't seen since probably Empire Strikes Back. So I thought it was great. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I like everything. My big thing is that the lightsaber fights need to have a narrative sort of arc to them. That's what makes them better, as opposed that's what the prequels went wrong. A lot of it was just fighting. It was like Matrix fighting for the sake of just fighting each other.
Yeah.
And I like the whole build-up. I like the fact that Finn gets the lightsaber first, and he can't particularly do anything with it. And then Rey gets it. I think is a nice turn. I always feel that's a good emotional payoff for the Finn character, sort of at the end, where he's willing to protect his friends and everything.
It's a hot lightsaber up the back,
which feels like it should do more damage than it does to him by the very end of it. But I guess their spinal replacement is advanced at this point.
Yeah, and I think I hate to be one of these guys, but I feel like Kylo Ren was probably pulling his punches a bit with him.
I get the opinion he's toying with him. They don't really make it explicit, but I wish they had made it a little bit more explicit. But I get that opinion, or that would be my take on it.
There's a lot of whining I've heard about this movie that comes down to that fight scene in like why would Finn be able to stand with Kylo Ren at all.
I
And the same,
have a friend who, well, that's his main criticism of it.
yeah, and the same with Rey. And it's like, well, first of all, they spend the entire movie telling you how powerful Chewie's blaster is, and then Kylo Ren takes one right in the fucking hip.
Yeah.
So clearly he's not at 100% when he starts fighting.
Yeah, they drop a lot of clues.
Yeah, and second of all, they establish even kind of, it's kind of ham-fisted. We can talk about this when we get to the Orange Yoda part. But they establish that there is some sort of hand-to-hand combat involved in being a stormtrooper. So the idea that Finn is fairly capable with a lightsaber is not beyond the pale.
Yep.
And Kylo Ren is clearly just fucking with him until he decides that he's had enough and just, pulls his spine out, basically.
Do you feel that maybe the mistake here is making Finn too much of a comic relief character? Do you like?
They try really hard with the jokes, and it feels like it tries pretty hard with the jokes.
Yes, I think it does damage to the Finn character because I would have liked to have seen a little bit of some stormtrooper training from him at some point.
Yeah. It's interesting because he is, for a movie where really you'd think that. So in the original Star Wars, you've got Luke Skywalker is basically your point of view character, right? He's the guy is not involved at all with the rebellion, so he's the one being brought into this new world, being shown stuff that he's never seen before and all that kind of stuff. And you would think that Rey would be that character in this movie, but it really feels like it's Finn, because Finn feels the one feels the least like he's part of this world, which is kind of weird because he's a stormtrooper. It seems like he's the one who's kind of like reacting more and more to the new things that he's being put into than even Rey is. But I mean, I guess they're kind of both of them. But when I think about it, I feel like, okay, Rey feels part of this world. Finn feels like, he almost feels like a comic relief character more than anything else.
Yeah,
It's probably why he's going to start the next movie in a coma.
Right. Well, he reminds me of he's the Han Solo role in this movie. He's the one that's like, what the fuck is all this shit? Like, how is this actually happening? And the Solo role, I think the Solo role worked better just because Solo also showed moments of being like badass in particular, and Finn doesn't really have that. Like he gets his shot at the end where he fights with the lightsaber, but before that he's not really intense enough or like a good enough fighter where I would understand how he came from the Stormtrooper universe. It's a minor problem, but I think that they should have just toned down his sort of jokey, hammy, like whoa, what's going on kind of stuff.
Well, what I noticed this time is man, it's a shame he defected because he is the only stormtrooper that can actually hit something, apparently.
Yes. Yeah.
But with him, it's weird because I kind of appreciate him because he's kind of bad at his job.
Sure.
Like
Well, it fits the theme of the Jedi being bad at their jobs in this.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, like one of the things I've said this on a multiple podcasts, but the best characters are usually not very good at their job.
Yep.
And Finn is kind of like his heart's there. He's really trying to help people, but he's just not capable enough to do it. Yeah. So that's why when he ends up being the point of contact for the action, it usually doesn't go very well, and he usually gets his ass handed to him. Which is kind of, I don't know, I kind of enjoyed that. But yeah, he is definitely more. He's less of the Han Solo, and he's more of the C-3PO.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he's the combination of these guys. So I guess we can. I guess we should just spend a little bit of time on Rey. We can get our sort of social justice warrior antics up by supporting her or claiming that it's horrible that it's a woman who's in the film. But I don't.
I only refer to it as Lady Star Wars.
Females. You call them females. Female Star Wars.
Force Awakens is Lady Star Wars.
The Rey's just problematic to me just because you don't get a lot of what's going on, and that's obviously going to come out in future movies and stuff. But as you were saying, Clay, it doesn't feel like her story in a lot of ways because she is not particularly drawn out in this in any sense. Yeah. She's kind of the character that everyone else plays off of as she is on her arc through. Like Kylo Ren plays off of her, Finn plays off of her, Han Solo plays off of her. So I don't get a lot from her. I think the role does well enough as it is with this sort of thing. And I don't know. I think she has potential to grow into the future. Like, I think The Last Jedi, the next movie that comes out, should probably explore this a little bit more. But in terms of this movie, it's not too impressive.
No, I mean, that's why I said she feels so much like a JJ Abrams character and less like a Star Wars character. Like, there's not a whole lot of development to her. There is a lot of mystery. And it should also be said that Daisy, what's her name?
Ridley.
Ridley, yeah.
Daisy Ridley. She was great.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
she's
she's very
definitely
good.
like charismatic. She's a good actress. I liked watching her on the screen. She's cute, but the character, there's not a whole lot to it. I loved her in the beginning when they established the mystery, and then it's just they jumped right into her being a Jedi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so I disagree with that a little bit because, you know, I understand that, you know, I understand the criticism that this movie kind of like relies on your interest in the next one more than it does, you know, kind of stand on its own. And I acknowledge that, and I don't entirely disagree with it. But for her specifically, I kind of feel like her character is kind of the story moving forward. She's kind of like finding out more about her is part of the story, is the main drive of the story. And in this one, I think meeting her and finding out that there's something about her and that she has these sort of preternatural disposition to the Force is enough for me to make me interested to see what they do with her later. Like I feel like going from nothing scavenger on Jakku up through she's basically pulling Excalibur out of the stone at the end is enough for me for this movie. Like if they were to have some scene where they're like, oh, I bet you didn't realize if Kylo Ren was like, we're not so different, you and I, seeing as we're both part of the same family or something, like that would just be too much, you know. Like I totally understand the criticism that, you know, it's you know, I guess it depends on your point of view of the characters and who's kind of on the journey. And like I said, I kind of viewed it more that the journey belongs to Kylo Ren in this movie. At least the clearer arc belongs to him. So it doesn't bother me that much that Rey doesn't have more of an endpoint or revelation to her character, because I feel like they do enough to kind of send her down the runway for the following movies. Now, that being said, and this goes for all of the similarities to you know, I know that's another thing is people are like, oh, it's just a rehash of all the other stuff. I totally understand that. That's part of my thread the needle kind of rationalization where it's like, well, they kind of, for a lot of people, I think they just needed to do stuff that seemed like Star Wars so they could, you know, get back on everybody's good graces. If Last Jedi comes out and it's just more of the same thing, then my opinion of this movie will go way down. Sure. But I am currently working on the assumption, not the assumption, but the hope that they did that just to kind of get everybody back into the Star Wars swing, and now they're going to do something different. But we'll see. I don't know.
It's something different for Last Jedi in terms of what? Like they wouldn't have this, like how this movie plays out would be totally different?
Like it just wouldn't be, it would be less of a rehash of the other movies.
Oh,
like they would actually just be moving the story forward, doing something new. I mean, I guess one of the things that hamstrings you with Star Wars in general is that it kind of seems like there's only a handful of things that you can do sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's the ring theory, Clay. You have to cling to the ring theory.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, well, this movie has to line up with I don't know where we are in the ring at this point.
That's very confusing, but I think it's probably 2, right? Because 1 and 6 go together, so 7 and 2 probably go together.
Well, I guess 7 and like 15 is how does this expand out?
It ties in with the 15th Thor movie, actually. Yes, is my ring theory. So,
yeah. But that was kind of I kind of went off topic there. But like I like her character. I don't think that you need a ton of backstory to make her work in this movie, and I think they give you enough for now. Clearly, they're going to address that other stuff later, and you know, so I think for what they do, I think it's fine.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think the next movie, I don't think there's any way that it can't be somewhat like Empire, right? Like, it's got to be something bad has to happen in the next movie, I would assume, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't, but I mean, like
that's a very general narrative thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say something bad happening means it's like a ripping it. Like this movie is kind of like if you go to the CD store, you're gonna see Journey's greatest hits, Leonard Skinner's greatest hits, and Star Wars' greatest hits, and that's just gonna be a DVD for the Force Awakens. It's kind of a little bit of everything from the first three movies.
Yeah.
And hopefully they've gotten that out of their system so they can do something a little bit different. But honestly, if it doesn't happen, it wouldn't surprise me. But if it does happen, I think that would be very, welcome.
So I think can I just add here? I think that's a really, I think you're being very hopeful, and I think the same way you do. Like, I hope that they just got this out of their system. But it brings it right back to like what you said earlier, that this is a polar opposite movie than what George Lucas did with the prequels, where the prequels were a guy trying to get out a story and focusing all of his energy on the story. And granted, that man doesn't understand human interactions, so it comes out a little weird, and he's an egomaniac. But this was something completely different, whereas it's not one guy doing it. I got the feeling, and my main criticism of it was that it wasn't written by a guy with a vision. It was written by a bunch of people in a room with a whiteboard. Like, all the way through, that's how it felt. Like, well, we have to do this. This would be too risky. We can do this here. We need 2 lightsaber fights. We need a space battle. There has to be X-Wings fighting TIE fighters. Like, I guess that's what bugs me about it. And I really do hope they got it out of the system, because you can do so much with the franchise. And I really do love the franchise. But I'm not too hopeful. What they showed me in the first one with Force Awakens was, I think that's what we're going to get with the next 2.
This is the movie that, to me, feels most like this is a franchise. Like, the prequels are terrible, but like, you'll never say that is not George Lucas's sort of goal with what he wanted to do. Like, if anyone else was able to weigh in, they would have made those movies better by telling George Lucas, this is terrible, like, we need to improve it. So I respect the fact that
it's like when your child hands you a drawing they did, and you're like, "Yep, you definitely drew that."
Yeah, this is definitely excellent. But like, the prequels are a lot of way like similar to The Room, that very bad movie. It's like, this is clearly this guy's like mindset on film, and this is what he wanted to do.
Yes.
And I'm glad
in that scene where Anakin's like, "I did not hit her. I did not hit her." Oh, hi, Jar Jar.
Oh, hi, Jar Jar.
That's the.
Why has nobody done that?
We'll cut in his stubs. Yeah.
Oh, somebody please do that.
But I think that I can respect the prequels, even though they're terrible, just for they are that. This to me is, and I've said this in other things, like the way that movie going or movie making seems to be at this point, because everything is so franchised and sort of like sequel dependent, that the directors are more just caretakers of things. They aren't actually making movies that are their opinion of what this universe would be. And if I were to make this universe, it's more, I'm a very gifted director, and I get a lot of directing jobs because I'm very good at maintaining franchises like this. I give people what they want. They're not the greatest original stories you've ever seen, but you hit all the nostalgia points and you retread enough while also giving a new fresh air into the whole thing to revitalize it. And that's what Abrams did for Star Trek, and it's kind of what he's done for Star Wars at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I am hopeful. Honestly, just based on what they did with Rogue One, it makes me think that, all right, they're maybe willing to take a couple chances that you wouldn't expect. Like,
who directed Rogue One?
I think his name's Gareth Edwards. I think the guy that did Godzilla.
Is Ryan
Johnson? Ryan Johnson is doing
the Last Jedi.
Doing the next one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm excited for that. If anything can break us out of the mold, I would think that Ryan Johnson directing the next one could change what I just said in the past.
Yeah, he's, as far as I know, he's writing it too.
Okay.
That makes me hopeful.
Yeah, and are we going to cover Rogue One at some point?
Yep. I still haven't seen it, but it's on Netflix now for everyone. Yeah.
Well, like, and what they do with Rogue One, without giving too much away, is not what I would have expected Disney to do with a Star Wars property. It, like, the last 45 minutes of Rogue One, I was like, oh, I genuinely was not expecting this level of violence.
Yeah.
And among other things, but it's like that gives me a little bit of hope that maybe that they are willing to take some chances and stuff. Like, I know the criticism of the Marvel movies is kind of what you're saying about the the caretaker thing. And I've noticed that the last few of them feels like they're getting away from that a little bit. The directors seem to be putting a little bit more of a stamp on things, which is nice. So maybe they're kind of, opening their grip a little bit. But it's unfortunate, but the way that it is for me is my opinion of Force Awakens weighs heavily on what they do with the next two of them.
Sure.
Like I can watch this movie right now and enjoy it, and I think I enjoy it more because I think the characters are great, and I think the interactions are great, and I think the way that they move the story along is great. But I also, like I said, completely understand all of the criticisms about it not standing on its own, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if the next two come out and it's the same shit over and over again, yeah, then I'm gonna be bummed out. But it won't totally surprise me, but I'm gonna be bummed out.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know. It's kind of difficult and kind of unfair to say that, because it should stand on its own. But I'll be really interested to see where they go with it.
Yeah, I mean, is there an argument for movies like this at this point do not need to stand on their own?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's tough because I mean, it's an instant criticism if you want to find something to hate about them. Like I read a review of Rogue One where they mentioned, well, if you take Rogue One and you make it not Star Wars, then it's a terrible movie. It's just it's a really, it's a stupid, bad sci-fi movie. That's just kind of, and I don't disagree with that, but it's like, you're, for better or worse, most of the emotional story weight in Rogue One depends on what you know about the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a good thing and a bad thing, because it lets you tell some kind of cool continuing stories, but it also, takes away from, it can seem to take away from having to actually create a beginning, middle, and end of a story.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to say, the answer to your question for me is like, no. I'm never going to get past that. It's a 2.5 hour thing that I'm watching and probably spending money to watch. Like, I need it to stand on its own or I'm going to hate it.
Yeah.
If I spend that time and spend that money and effort and I walk away with like nothing but a teaser to go buy the next one, yeah, no, it sucks. I hate it.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. I don't disagree with that, but I think there's levels of which you can do it and have it be satisfying. Like I felt satisfied by the characters in this movie and the character movement and the movement of the story. I don't think this movie is as much of an ad for the next one as some of these movies tend to be. Like, there are some of them that you can really tell that they are just laying pipe hard for the next movie and don't really care about what's going on and inside the story they're telling now.
Yeah.
I don't really think this is one of those. I think they are, if that was the case, then Rey and Poe and Finn would not be nearly as engaging to watch. They probably wouldn't have killed off Han Solo because, I mean, why not? More Han Solo is going to bring people back to the movie. There's no reason to kill him off.
That's right.
I think this is not as egregious as some other movies are, or general egregious. When that's the new character that
he just twirls ticket stubs in his 8 hands. Yeah.
I think there are other movies that are a lot more egregious with that stuff than this is.
I think it's just I think I'm sort of bouncing back because I'm sort of being like beaten down by the Netflix model here a little bit, where now that we can binge watch everything, I do feel that it's infecting movies a little bit. The downside is that the Netflix show all comes out at once, so you can binge it you can go through that thing as fast as you want, where the movies still take 2 to 3 years apart from each other.
Right.
So It's incredibly unsatisfying to have to wait for that long time, and I think that's the downside of the movies doing it. Although I do think that ideology is penetrating the movies because of how sequel based they are on everything. And I'm it's like my relationship with craft beer. I'm now just swinging away from it like the other way, where I'm like, I'd like to just watch the top 100 movies of all time because they stand on their own. It's like an hour and a half and I can just finish it in that time and be done with it.
Yeah.
And I that kind of a mentality Suits me at this point, although this is
Wait,
obviously
hold on.
Star Wars.
So you're actively choosing to drink like a Miller Lite now? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, it's just the next beer, if any beer pushes how hoppy it is to me, I'm just like, fuck this thing, get it out of my face. Like I don't want your hoppy beer, get it away.
Okay,
from me.
I thought you meant you were swinging back. Like, you know what? I just don't like quality beer. I would prefer just like a lukewarm Coors Light. That's been like open in the fridge for about like a day and a half.
I think a lot of these smaller craft breweries are just basically doing that and just selling it to me with an IPA written all over the package anyway.
That's okay. That's fair.
But yeah, that's my sort of take on it. I would like them to stand a little bit on their own, although, going back to the originals and the prequels, I feel that all of those movies stood on their own more than this movie stands on its own, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, for the prequels are terrible at it, but they do it.
Yeah, it's just it's that it wasn't really the culture to do it the way that they're doing it now.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah. I don't disagree. I don't want to defend that model by saying, oh, it was a different time, or defend the current model by saying it was a different time, but it kind of was a little bit. But yeah, the Netflix thing, it's been interesting because it seems like it is bleeding into movies, but the movies aren't learning from it. At least most of them aren't, because a lot of them seem to be putting the cart before the horse, in that they're trying to get you interested in the next one, but they're not doing anything to establish your interest in the thing at all in the first one.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was the big, one of the big missteps with what DC Comics is doing with their movies is they're just like, hey, remember how Marvel spent, 10 movies before they got to the Avengers, and they actually built a world and then they combined it? We're not going to do that. We're just going to just jump to the Avengers and hope that you want to see the next one after that. Whereas the Netflix thing is like, you can binge watch stuff, but they are like the quality has moved to Netflix and moved to this decompressed storytelling kind of thing.
Yeah. But I think that
I don't know where I'm going with this, so feel free to cut me off.
Well, I think Netflix is still learning how to do it, because you're talking about the Defenders, like the Netflix, the DC version of. No, not the Defenders would be the Marvel version of like Daredevil and Iron Fist and everything. They did that sort of model with it, where they all had their own series and then they combined with each other. The problem with me is that Netflix still takes almost too long to get to that point where they're all together, because maybe just speaking for the general fan, I wouldn't want to. I don't want to pour that amount of time into these characters that I don't really care about, where I'm more concerned about seeing them all together is a more interesting story to me.
Yeah.
It would be like
that's the way I felt with comic books growing up in general. Like, I really liked the comic characters, but I couldn't jump into like a Superman solo comic book and just start reading it. I couldn't do it, but all the crossover stuff I ate up as a kid. Like, I loved it. That's all I wanted to read.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting kind of a little off topic, but
I'll pull it back. This is my thesis statement.
I was just gonna say, with the Defenders stuff, I agree with you. I feel like they're doing too much with that, because like the Daredevil show is really good, Jessica Jones show is really good, and both of those shows stand on their own as their own thing. Did you watch Daredevil? I can't remember.
I watched season 1 of Daredevil.
Did you not like it?
It should have been 6 episodes. It
yeah, that's the other thing. They're too long. Yeah, but Luke Cage and Iron Fist. Luke Cage is okay. It's not bad. Iron Fist is basically 13 episodes of just hot garbage.
Yeah, sure.
But it was like they did it because they had to do it to get to the Defenders thing.
Right.
You could have introduced that character in 30 seconds and saved yourself 18 hours of television.
Was he a similar 13 episode or 18 episode?
Yeah.
Okay.
It felt like it was about 30, but it was 13. But the way they did it in the movies, I think was a little bit more successful, because they introduced each of their main players for the Avengers in their own kind of thing. And so you had a recognition of these characters, you had a recognition of the actors playing them and what kind of characters they were. So when you put them together, you were that much more interested in seeing how they were going to all react with each other. And you'll notice that, well, I guess there is a Hulk movie, but it doesn't really count. But I was going to say there's no real Hulk movie before they get there, because he's, you don't need a Hulk movie. He's the Hulk. You just explain him in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But I don't know how we got onto this topic.
Well, I mean, it can tie back into the Force Awakens a little bit, because you're basically doing the same.
Supreme Leader Snoke standalone movie is what I'm saying.
I need the what's the general played by Don Hall Gleason, Huxley?
Oh yeah, Hux or something.
Yeah, General Hux or something. I need
for instance, when they started doing the Star Wars movies again, and the first thing that came out was like, dude, they're finally gonna make a Boba Fett movie. I was like, who the fuck wants to see a Boba Fett movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've already seen Mace Windu take out his daddy with no sweat, so we know that there can't be anything good going on with that, right?
Yeah, or like there's some talk of doing like a Yoda movie. It's like, what? Who?
What's the what's the female
Yoda's
Yoda's
the
name?
Story? Oh yeah,
Yaddle.
Yaddle. They should just have the romance of Yaddle and Yoda.
Can we?
Together.
What's Orange Yoda's name?
Oh, I was just looking at it. Yes.
All right. She's awful, right? Do we agree on this, that it's just a really cheap and stupid character that doesn't do anything or need to be there? She gives Rey the lightsaber, and that's it. That's all she's there to do.
Yes.
Yeah, basically.
I think that whole scene sucks. Because it's yet another cantina scene. What is the market for these cantinas? They're just everywhere.
Would you prefer it was a 50s diner with a fat four-armed 50s diner soda jerk?
At least it was an original idea that was terrible, but it was an original idea.
Was it, or was it the fact that George Lucas has two ideas, Star Wars and American Graffiti, and he was like, you know what? Let's just do them both at the same time.
Maz Kanata is a pointless character that they realized is pointless, so they gave her glasses, right? Like, that's the point of that accoutrement of the character. Like, the character is so pointless that you need kind of a weird thing to make them memorable in a way. And I don't know. That whole middle section of this movie, I feel, is probably the weakest stretch, where they're in the cantina and then they're doing all that stuff, and then Rey gets captured by Ren and all that stuff.
I like that scene. I like the scene where she gets the lightsaber, and I like the scene where she gets captured. But
that entire battle was just disgusting.
I mean specifically the scene with her and Kylo Ren where she gets captured.
Where she gets
like her
Force
being
frozen,
interrogated. Yeah, that was all right. That was
and like before that, where she's like in the woods, and then
he freezes her with the Force.
Yeah, and then that stuff is pretty good.
What don't you like about that battle, Dave?
Oh my God, the setup to it is so dumb. It's just like it's almost like the characters should have just said to each other, like, "Oh my God, now it's time to have a space battle and a ground battle at the same time." That there was really nothing going on there. And then what killed it for me, even the first time I saw it, when I was digging the movie and liking it because I was comparing it to the prequels at the time, was that scene when Poe comes in for the first time flying, and they don't know that it's him, but I think I counted it, and it was 8 or 10 TIE fighters in like 11 seconds. It's just like a video game sequence of him doing flips and blowing up TIE fighters. And if that didn't explain how good of a pilot he was, it cuts to Finn on the ground going, "That's some pilot." It's just that's really embarrassing.
That's inexplicable. I don't know why they did that. I will say, so there are a couple things that I would change that could have that scene specifically has a couple things in it that they really should have done differently outside of just the general, the fighting. I don't know why they show you that Poe is flying that thing until he gets out, because the entire up to that point you think that he's dead, and Finn thinks that he's dead.
Oh, right.
And that reaction from Finn seems to be sort of like, it's like he doesn't know who the pilot is. It's a stupid thing, but it's like he doesn't know who the pilot is, and he's then happy to find out that it's his buddy, or
the guy he met.
If you're on the internet, his closeted gay love interest.
They do have a very Rocky and Apollo embrace when they run towards each other. Yeah,
but like that, I feel like that makes more sense if the audience doesn't know that that's Poe flying that thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it should be more of a surprise that Poe is alive and not just up here he comes in a black TIE fighter. I mean a black X-wing. The other thing, I know the stun baton stormtrooper gets a lot of shit. Probably rightfully so. That character should be Captain Phasma.
Who's Captain Phasma?
You wouldn't
Brienne
even know.
of Tarth.
Yeah,
I see.
The chrome stormtrooper captain.
Okay.
That should be her.
Yeah.
Because otherwise her character makes no fucking sense in this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's in there, what she does. You don't even really get an idea of what happens to her at the end because they just sort of allude to throwing her into a trash compactor or something.
Yep.
But like, she's the captain of his squadron, and first of all, I don't know why some random stormtrooper would recognize Finn without his helmet on. But secondly, she's the captain of the squadron, so it would make narrative sense for her to be the one that's calling him out.
Yeah, calling him a traitor, right?
I don't know why they didn't do that, and because that sequence ends with that stormtrooper getting blasted by Han Solo. You don't have to kill her. You don't have to end it that way.
Right.
You can get her out of there alive.
Yep.
So that always kind of confused me as to why you can't just do the same thing, but actually have Captain Phasma do something instead of just being a talking point for publicity.
Captain Phasma. Yeah, I mean, we've seen weapons that can stop lightsabers in the prequels, I guess. So I guess that's okay. I don't know. Do you find that an obnoxious thing that the lightsabers have other weapons that are not lightsabers that they can hold their own against?
No.
Yes.
It annoys you. Yeah.
It annoys me.
I don't. I mean, I think of it like practically. If I was the Empire, I'd be like, maybe we should develop some weapons that can stand up to lightsabers.
I know, poor little R&D money into this lightsaber technology. It's going places.
Hey, I know we've allotted let's just generously say most of the budget for our planet-sized, planet-killing weapon.
Our third Death Star.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we haven't really talked about that. I mean, that ties into it's just a beat that we're repeating from previous movies, right? That's,
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything else to say about it.
Yeah,
it got dumped on a lot already.
Yeah, it's just fairly lazy. I mean, I don't know.
I will say, let me just say, a hollowed out planet is cooler than a full space station. Like that was.
Oh yeah.
If they're gonna do it again. Yeah, that was cooler. I'll say it.
Yeah, I will. I totally agree. But if you want to get into like the practicality of it. There's enough arguments about how they could possibly build a Death Star-sized space station at the full height of the Empire. How does a group that has risen from the ashes of the Empire manage to build that thing in a fucking planet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, where does the money come
politics
from?
To it.
Yeah, where does the money come from? Like, who are the people on that planet that they displaced? And obviously, I don't want them to go into this in the movie, but it's just. It's just like it's such an impractical weapon.
Well, Dave,
when they get to the Force Awakens prequel movies in 10 years, then
I love them.
I mean, they probably had to pick a planet that has a very quick day-night, right? Because if you miss with that thing, you have to wait a couple hours until the planet spins around and it lines up again, right? Like this.
Yeah, just
the Death Star. At least you can spin the space station around, and I'd buy that. But the planet is. I don't know if that's the way that it's actually going down, but yeah,
if there's another thing in the next movie that they have to fly in and blow up, I'm out.
You can't really
like as much as I like what's going on. If they do that again, I'm like,
you can't really do anything else though, right? Isn't that?
I feel like they've topped out.
Like once you start getting into blowing up planets, there's not a lot of space, that you can actually go to around that. It's a very I don't know. The only other thing that I think that I'm surprised they haven't done is some sort of like mass brainwashing or something. Like I don't know where else you can go with that. Although this movie's hinting at the possibility of brainwashing, right? It implies that the Force is actually sort of a interrogation technique that you can use. I don't know. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to say, or we should give our final thoughts about this movie?
There's one thing I do want to say. This movie So I enjoy talking about this stuff with you guys. I've found that in my real life, where Dave, you can attest to this as well. Maybe 15 years ago, I would be happy to talk about this stuff and argue the finer points of Star Wars with anybody. I'm sure we've done it many times, Dave. But like, I've gotten to the point in my life where I just don't care to do that anymore.
Yep.
I was at Comic-Con a couple years ago, and I was out to dinner with some friends and some younger friends, and they started like getting into this, and I was like, man, I was looking at a friend of mine who's roughly the same age as me that has the same thing, where I was just like, I don't want to spend my dinner listening to you point out why Rey's force powers don't make any sense and how this movie's full of plot holes, specifically because I don't think it's really, I think all of the stuff that gets like the minutia, they actually explain in this movie. There's a lot of like dialogue that explains a lot of stuff, like the big one that I actually kind of was like, oh, that's what I have kind of a point, is the map thing, where they're like, well, if they had the entire map except for that one piece, why didn't they just go to that other place and just look around?
Yeah.
But they didn't, because the rebellion didn't know that R2 had the map. And also the map, that the little piece that they had, they look at it, they say, well, this is no star system we have any knowledge of.
Okay.
But it's like a lot of stuff like that. They actually do a pretty good job of tying up a lot of those loose ends. And you could argue that they sacrifice larger scale plot stuff for that, but it's actually not that deep as far as inconsistencies and stuff like that go, which is kind of impressive.
Yeah, I don't find that the movie has particular. I'm less inclined to sort of criticize the nuts and bolts of the movie as opposed to just sort of the general sense of it. I think it's more of I think it's just kind of a limited ability of criticism, where I think the movie's bigger problems are bigger than like what the movie actually is. It's more about like what it represents in terms of movie storytelling, and like what are you allowed to get away with in movies like this, in terms of like what do you need to supply a paying audience with, like Dave was talking about.
Right.
That's more my criticism of the movie than I think the movie itself is like a pretty solid B plus to me. Like, it's enjoyable to watch, and I don't think there's many problems with it. Doesn't blow my socks off, but it's certainly something.
Yeah, I would agree that
I'm
like
actually,
there's a B rating on that thing. But the question is like, what do you compare it to? When I went into it the first time, I compared it to the prequels, so I liked it.
Right.
But then as time went on, it has the Star Wars brand on it, so I want it to live up to the original three. So I like it less. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm interested. I was just going to say, I'm looking forward to doing Rogue One, because I haven't watched Rogue One since I saw it in the theater, which I really did like it. But I think this might be a better movie than Rogue One, personally.
Oh, you have the worst opinions.
we can get into
Rogue
it.
One was really good, and Force Awakens was really not.
I was telling Dave before, I've seen both opinions. I see people who do not like Rogue One, and I see people who love it. So I'm interested. What do you think? I'll like it, or do you think I'll hate it?
I don't know. I don't know your taste well enough. What do you say, Clay?
I don't know. The plot's kind of dodgy in Rogue One. I know you're a big plot guy, Wes, so that might bother you. But yeah, I don't dislike Rogue One. I think it's great. I really enjoy it. I think it's like Rogue One. Rogue One to me was the movie where I saw it and I was like, you know what? I'm fine with this now. I've kind of accepted the fate of Star Wars, where it's like, all right, this is just how it's going to be. They're going to make these movies. I'm going to see them, and I'm going to go, that was pretty good. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
It's not like the sacred cow that it may once have been. It's not my thing anymore. They're not making them for me, but I'm hoping that I'm going to enjoy them.
Yeah. Yeah. When did the sacred cowness disappear?
For me, I don't know about you. Well, I feel like, Dave, after you saw the first one, it kind of changed you as a human. Episode 1, I mean. But it was I never kind of held it quite as sacred as a lot of other people did. But Yeah, I don't know. I think the prequels did a pretty good job of dialing me back off of that.
Yeah, I think it was the second one, really. I think the first one, people were like, well, maybe he's just getting his sea legs out there. Like, it's been a while since he directed a movie. Maybe this will just work out in the wash. I think it was the second one that really turned people away. And the second one's just so terrible.
Yeah. For me, it's like, it's going to sound like I'm saying this hyperbolically, but I'm trying to make an honest comparison. It's like a religion. Like kids grew up with this stuff like it's a religion. And then the prequels came out and you had to make your choice. Did you want to double down on this stupid cult or did you want to jump ship? And I jumped ship.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the same thing happened when the New Testament came out.
Yeah. I read Richard Dawkins' film criticism of the Star Wars prequels, and I was like, you know what? This guy's talking a lot of sense.
Where is the character development for Jesus?
this Jesus character, I don't know. He seems to have a lot of unexplained powers.
I think that's a pretty good takeaway from it. I think everyone is in the same boats about this movie, I think.
Hey, by that metric, actually, if the third movie ends with Rey being crucified in front of everybody, good on you, Disney.
Yeah, you were saying you were surprised by the amount of violence in Rogue One, so maybe the crucifixion scene will really just put you over the edge. Mel Gibson directs the episode 9.
I can't wait to have that conversation. I just love the crucifixion scene in Star Wars 9.
It's a good one. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Dave and Clay, for coming on and talking Star Wars Force Awakens.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Guys, if you enjoyed this, we're going to be continuing on with Rogue One. That'll wrap it up, and then we'll be doing it once every 2 years or whatever when the movies actually come out and we can catch up.
Once every 2 years, 2 years after the movie comes out.
Yes, exactly. It's taken a long time to get to this point, but we're happy about it. Anyway, if you guys like the show, a like and a comment, appreciate it on Facebook. You can go to patreon.com/the Pensky File. Give a couple dollars. You get extra stuff like this to talk about different movies and things like that. But you go to patreon.com/the Pensky File. All right, that's it. So we're moving on to Rogue One. We'll have that out in a little while. And we'll see where we stand with the Star Wars franchise as a whole. See you then.